In the middle we have Ryan Farlow, and the man over the corner is Jason Edwards. So how this start is basically, I'm always curious about it. Like, I know an awful lot of agents, and for all the kind of time to talk about them being the spawn of the devil, being the most greatest people in music. Actually, like agents, I like talking to people. I like talking to people like Rob Childs and like Jeff Craft and people like that. Hearing these stories later, I'm always fascinated by one aspect of the agents. How do you become an agent? So let's start with a bit of career guidance. Start with you, Eleanor. How did you become an agent? What did you do beforehand?
Well, I did my undergrad as a computer science and business, a bit random, and then I moved to Dublin and just badgered one of the promoters in NCD for a very long time, until I got offered a job there and worked as a promoter for 6 years. And then I had kind of developed the relationships with the agents across Europe and started talking to Pitch & Smith and got a role with them. That was it.
What about you, Brian? What was your career path?
I mean, it's very similar. I kind of was.
Did you want to become an agent, or did you want to just work in music business?
I knew I always wanted to be live music, for sure. But I think I was a promoter for a long time, so I realized you can't make any money on it. So I was like, who's making the money? And then I became an agent.
So, have you always worked at Windish? You worked somewhere else before?
No, I was at an agency called Pinnacle for 5 years before I was at Windish, which is just another small agency. So I was there kind of as a junior agent assistant, worked my way up through, and then moved on.
And what bands have you worked with?
So we work with quite indie. It's Caribou, Nico Case, Tory Boy, Jose Gonzalez, about 158 artists in total.
Okay, so which acts are you responsible for?
So I look after Sun Lux, Nazca Limes, I'm trying to think, Jade, based on Irish act, another Irish act called Princess. Yeah.
Okay, what would you mind? What else do you work with?
Kind of Moccasin, Joy Flammable, Patrick Watson. Our agency is huge. I mean, we have 600 acts, from XX to Lord to Animal Collective.
Okay. And Jason, what was your kind of roots in agent?
Kind of similar to these two as well. I started off just knowing that I wanted to work in music, so I actually started off on the journalism route. Interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's hope for me.
There is hope too. But that turned into getting involved in the press or agency side of things. So I worked at a record label, and then I started managing, and then I started promoting.
Which record label did you work at?
Oh, it was a tiny label called One Records, which was funded by Sony for about 2 years before we decided not to sign Farlow and TV, and then it folded.
Who did you manage?
A band called Dan and Aykroyd, and another band called Blue Plot by Horses. And I got more involved in booking their shows than their agents were for a while, and thought, oh, I enjoyed that a lot more than babysitting these bands.
Okay. So at Coda, what acts do you book?
I personally book artists like Grimes, Temples, Blood Orange, Son, Kindness, kind of more alternative pop and indie, I guess.
Okay. So which one do you want to kind of talk about? What's an average day in the life of an agent?
Well,
Jason, go on.
I really don't know. It's pretty structured. I mean, it's ultimately an office job. Predominantly is that. So the average agent day where we're not traveling or we're not at a festival is figuring out your to-do list in the morning, getting your call list together. If anyone still works on call lists, it feels very 90s. Figuring out who your priorities are that day, who needs, what tours are you working on, who's got an album coming in a while you need to figure out a plan for. It's a lot of phone calls, a lot of emailing. I guess we try to work in very different ways, but in as structured way as we can. We're trying to manage our rosters and,
And it never goes that way. No matter what you think you're going to do, it never happens.
You get to. I think that's the average day. Score off 3 things on your to-do list. Yeah. And then have a whole new to-do list by the time you've done those.
Yeah. Like, at any one time you could be working on 7, 8 tours throughout Europe. Yeah. So, that's a lot of coordination.
Okay, one question for all three of you. Given the fact that you're all working on multiple acts, is it very clear to you who takes priority? Is it a case of maybe the act that's kind of where the tour is very, very proper? Imagine if someone's booking out, say with Grimes goes on tour, all your agents kind of focused on grind? Or is it a case of, like, I mean, it is the manager who shouts loudest? Is it a case of that manager happens to be managing band X that's really big, they have a small band who are on your roster, you're looking after them? Like, you can talk about priorities.
Again, I think everyone works in very different ways. What we try to, we actually split our rosters up by day at Coda. We all start to do this, so we split our roster up. We have certain acts that will be our priority each Monday, and then the next on Tuesday they're our priority acts. So the focus is kind of shift. It works. I was really sensitive about it, but if you work with a larger roster, especially, you can't just be winging it every day and being like, oh, I need to phone that manager, I need to deal with that too. You have to have some sort of structure where also you're not over supporting one act and therefore neglecting some others.
But what if something happens on the Wednesday that you're not working?
Then absolutely you have to deal with it, but it's more like, okay, these are the priorities. They'll always have other priorities that crop up, but generally, okay, we'll check in with these managers regularly, every week, like that. So you don't really get into a priority system, because it can be dangerous, even when you have your biggest artist on tour. If you get too obsessed with that, and you're missing out on opportunities for your baby bands, well, you're missing it, you're not developing them properly. So it's kind of I don't know.
That's really interesting. Like, I haven't come across that before.
No.
It sounds quite innovative.
Do certain bands get multiple days?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will always adapt. The basic concept. That's how, not all of us work like that, some of us do.
Yeah.
It sounds like for all three of you, like say with Brian and Eleanor, how do you decide when to take on new acts? How do you decide, this is the time now to take on, you see a band, you want to represent them, is there a case of paralysing, you've got too much on your plate already? Is it a case of the band has to be ready? Are you taking on little baby bands who've never met an Asian before? We look at an Asian kind of going you don't look like Gary Gold from Entourage.
Well, you have to look at it in a way where there's only a certain amount of developing talent that you can represent at one time, because it takes so much of your time and you want to do a good job, so you can only do a handful of those, and then you need to have the ones that are making more money, so you kind of balance things out that way, I guess. Depends on your workload.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever the same twice. There's no scenario on my roster where the same band, the same story happened where I signed up for that reason.
Yeah.
Definitely always starts with the music, first and foremost, for me at least, but there's so many variables that can point you in that dance direction where there's no set way.
All three of you, where do you consider, do you consider festivals like Hard Work Plus Eurosonic, so as good places to find bands? Or is it the case the bands are playing are already represented? Are you going there each
For me, it's awesome because I'm in the US, so I get a head start. Where South by for me is terrible. I find nothing else on.
Well, it's the same for
Well,
the Great
it's
Escape for us.
Yeah, exactly. I found bands Great Escape or Eurosonic every year, and I'm sure they all have agents in the UK.
Yeah, or I just went to Big Sound in Australia and I found that really productive. There was lots of good stuff that came out of it.
I think actually, festivals like Eurosonic especially, which tend to be showcases which they don't tend to rebook. So it's very much like you do it once, and if they want you back at a later stage because you become massively successful, your success story, they have you back. Well, these showcases have actually become, for European agents and for the showcases in Europe, they're quite good tactical plays for breaking artists. Yeah. So, I pay attention to new acts on things like Eurosonic, but really when I'm there it's to build the acts that I have there playing and making sure that they're showcasing to the right people. So I guess a little mix of yes and no.
Okay, the type of band is 10% of what? So when bands sign with you, what are they getting in return for giving you 10% of their fat fees? Eleanor.
What are they getting? I guess our experience, our network, our contacts. When you book Europe, particularly, every single market is very different. Also, there's loads of layers in Europe where you have so you'll have a European agent, and then you might have a sub-agent that is a selling agent only in Belgium, or you might have a national promoter, or you might have a local promoter. So there's a network of contacts that you need to bring a band throughout Europe. And I guess every agent is different when they approach it, but we try to develop the band in every market in Europe. So you're getting the experience that we have and the contacts that we have and what comes with that.
I think there's also a very boring element on top of the creative and the like booking side of things, which the service that an agent provides is to make the performance that they've booked for you safe, legal, and so that's ultimately what we get. What we're getting paid for is the contract that we issue.
Sorry, that's kind of please no microphone errors. So what you're doing back is actually you use the word safe and legal. So what they're really paying for is you're kind of doing due diligence on dodgy mowers.
Yeah, pretty much, and also it's making it so that when you're going to get paid for that show, and we guarantee that, and the basic things like the taking of the deposit, the handling of the deposits, and the
Pushing the contract.
yeah, exactly, and having an accounts department, having access to all these people. So you are paying ultimately for the service on top of the booking part of it. So that's a big part, really, of why our fee is there.
But do you also get involved when things go wrong on that front? When it turns out that someone actually doesn't back themselves up, doesn't adhere to the contract, doesn't pay your act?
Absolutely, we've had that situation quite a few times in Ireland. I'll get into that. But yeah, we do. I mean, if it comes down to it, you do have to.
Let's talk in general here because this is being recorded.
Okay. We have to list legal proceedings on some things, and that you're there to support your artists and make sure that you're doing everything within your power and your remit to make sure that the money is paid.
Okay, so in that terms, this is a question for all three of you. Over the last couple of years, there's been a massive growth in terms of festivals. Besides the festivals being done by our good friend Melvin Ben, he's Coda, and all the big promoters, there's also been lots and lots of smaller festivals coming up. This summer, we've seen loads of instances of festivals going on. There is the Ultimate Party with Joe Walking, there is the Light Colour Sound here in Ireland, there are other festivals where there were a lot of issues around that. All agents need to kind of get their acts on these festivals. So, are you ultra careful when it comes to new festivals?
Absolutely. But then there's always going to be an element of risk, because you can't be overly careful with the new festivals to the point that you don't give them a chance to breathe. So, I mean, it's a classic thing I think we all work on. If someone emails you from a Gmail address and offers you a crazy amount of money for a band at a new festival you've never heard of, it's going to be like, you can't immediately presume it's going to be a scam, but you're probably going to say, okay, we need 100% of that fee right now, and then we'll believe it. So, but then again, it's like, you also want to support people that are genuinely trying to do something creative and interesting, so you'll give them a bit of help, or maybe if they're struggling to bankroll themselves, then come up with different payment plans and different ways that they can actually survive and,
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do is issue legal proceedings. You do want to go through every other hoop before you do that, which is in terms, and you know they're good for it. Let's say you're willing to get people leverage.
But you got to protect the artists. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
But then again, in the case of one of the festivals that you mentioned, one of a very well trusted promoter, booking very big acts, then none of us really foresaw it collapsing. It's always a risk.
I think there was an element of you do pay for that too. You have an experience with certain people, and you know that maybe some people pay quicker than others, or some people are more.
In the case of that particular promoter, Jason, there was a really good piece done. I can't remember who the journalist was. Either on the Guardian, and it just delved into the kind of I suppose the company structure of the people behind all tomorrow's parties and all sorts of parties. It's reading that, they did a really good forensic account of companies being shut as it's been being kind of switched around. I was thinking, I was like, Jesus, I wouldn't trust ATP after this. I wouldn't buy a ticket for an ATP event. Talk to me a little bit about from the agent's point of view. It's an easy question.
It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because there would be some agents out there that would look at that and just immediately go.
Well, I think there's a few agencies that have literally stopped doing business with.
But don't they have relationships with so many of these bands?
This is the thing, when you take, and this is kind of what you have to have leeway for some people, because what they were doing and what they've always done is such a culturally significant part of the music industry and of the live business. They're responsible for supporting and breaking so many important artists and giving them all, and there's, even in what's happened, there's still a lot of supporters that will continue to work with them from a kind of moral standpoint. So it's kind of when our job blurs a little bit. We do work in a creative industry, but if you strip away all of the creativity in the music, we're a very clean-cut business model. But sometimes that gets a little bit blurred because you kind of, we do it for the love of music, man. Like, we do it for the art and for the great experiences. So it's a difficult, I think we're probably three agents that kind of appreciate that side of things more than some, with the less corporate end of things. We get the creativity and the flexibility.
Do you find as well, just something you said there, Jason, like I'm opening out to all three of you, do you find sometimes that festivals will go behind your back in terms of go to the management direct or try and find other ways around the band?
Sure, they don't want to deal with us. We'll make them pay more. We're a headache for it. Sometimes.
Well, it's kind of rare that would happen. Do you think?
It happens, especially something like ATP. I'm sure those guys, everyone knows each other.
Yeah.
I don't work with ATP, so I'm sure.
Like, I think most promoters are quite
Respectful.
respectful, that's the word. Yeah, respectful. They do go to the agent first because they know it's kind of, because agents don't have contracts. Like, we're the part of the music industry that everything's done in a handshake and everything's done in relationships. So
You mean you don't contract the actual act in the first place?
yes,
So
exactly.
you have
So
contracts
the way I was at a conference recently and Tom put it really well is that the reason there's no contract is because why would you want to work with an artist who doesn't want to work with you? So if all communication was to break down and you had 6 months left in your contract, why would you want to work with them for 6 months? Because it's going to be difficult and it's not going to be productive. So for that reason, there isn't a legal back end to what we do in the relationship.
Do you share intel as agents about dodgy promoters? Other times at ILMC, we all go to a back room kind of go like, do not work with X.
We tell our agencies.
We have blacklists.
Oh yeah.
The dreaded Coda blacklist. That's a good email we get to send around. Actually, it's quite terrifying.
Have you seen that to me? Have you seen that to me?
Maybe.
I'd like to see that.
Do you want to be on a blacklist?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm on many blacklists. But okay, so that's really interesting. I'm always kind of fascinated by that because even though like it is a dog eat dog world in terms of it says what you do, you are a friendly bunch.
Well, we have to be because we have to protect our artists and look after our own kind of interests. But I mean, there's agents I can phone up and be like, how much did you get paid for this? And in most other industries like that, people be like, shut up, why am I telling you? None of your business. But it's important for us to get a gauge of how the market is and so generally we're quite open. Again, we've got three that work like that. Not everyone does, but
I think it's more and more these days. I think the younger agents are definitely more inclined to do that. Not so much the older generation.
Is something like ILMC still relevant to younger agents?
No.
That's right. That solves my problem. What we'll do next March. ILMC is the International Live Music Conference, and like various people said you should definitely go there. And I was kind of this week like a bunch of boreal farts playing football.
It is.
No, it would be relevant if it was the only showcase, but they just haven't kept up with the times when you have the Great Escape or when you have this, or when you so much more to the game from other ones.
Did you kind of like you kind of said you all share information, you're all quite friendly, you kind of know from each other like which festivals paying what money, it's quite good like that. Is the agency world, this question maybe more for Eleanor and for you, Ron, is it more open to new entrants? Is it like in terms of like new agencies starting up and things like that? Do you kind of think like it's open that kind of thing? For example, Windish opened an office over in Europe, or like we say Pitcher Smith. Is it basically more open to kind of new entrants than two you shouldn't have focused more on?
I think it depends again on the agency. Some agencies really support the growth of bringing in young people and moving them up to agents. Other agencies, literally, you will be an assistant until the day you die. You will never be an agent. And I don't agree with that structure personally because I think it's really good to have new people come in with new ideas and support that.
Well, in the case of Windish, for example, like Brian, are you planning a European office? Will we be headquartered in Dublin, for example? Tom's in having dinner with Dennis Desmond back in January after yours.
I think Galway is where we're going to be located. In Galway. That's going to be
Let's be serious. Are there plans for a European office?
No. He's never told me.
Right, okay. So surely the artists you kind of work on in terms of American Offshore who say to you, we much prefer to work with you rather than kind of work with X-Ray or Coda or Pitch and Smith.
What would I say if that happened?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm too busy. I can't deal with that. There's enough to do in North America. It's kind of why it exists the way it does exist. I mean, that's why we have our territory and they have their territory.
I think
But there is a lot of
partnership.
there you go.
Partnerships, for sure.
So,
Well,
yeah.
Coda's a great example.
In January, 50% of the company was purchased by Paradigm Talent Agency, an American company. And I guess part of that deal was on the basis that we can share talent and information.
I mean, the agency group has a London office.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
The agency group has got an Irish CEO, Gavin Riley.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gavin Riley, independent news and media, extensive Brian's partner.
But there definitely is a trend that some people think is starting where a lot of artists now want representation for the world, so they want to deal with one company for the world, where you have another service that agencies provide is that you have a database and you have a login for your artists, so everything would be there, all of their North American dates, all of their European dates, all of their contracts, all of their tax forms, like everything's held in the one place, and there is some people that believe that that's the way it's
It's
moving.
lazy.
Okay, you speak about consolidation. I mean, as agents, you do all the time with that dirty devil with the motors. You know, there's been a lot of consolidation in that particular market, Live Nation, Festival, Coda, whatever. How do you view that? Will you just give us kind of like a top to head approach to that, starting with you?
I missed that.
Sorry, I should
Sorry.
listen more carefully. In terms of consolidation, Mark, in terms of like the companies kind of going under the Live Nation umbrella
Yes.
or entities
Yeah.
like Festival Public, like you mean snapping up festivals like their Pac-Man. You know, like is that good from your point of view? I mean, is that a reason why you try and support independent festivals to make sure there's competition in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think it's really important, absolutely. Like, I mean, in any form of business, you don't want there to be one major player and that person to own everything. You want there to be people that are doing it on all different tiers for all different reasons, and keep things.
I think the consolidation, this might be a little controversial, but I mean in a positive way. I think the consolidation is actually a fairly healthy part of the game every so often. It happened with the recording business where a lot of labels consolidated into bigger labels and then out because there was then more space in the market, new things could emerge. So there's always like this ebb and flow of a bit of shrinkage in terms of the number of companies out there, but it's only so new ones can start. And yes, absolutely we're interested in developing those. But it's kind of like a necessary evil every so often. Once you, if there's it's such a competitive market, especially now, and this kind of goes back to the point of supporting new agencies, which I think is what you're asking. Like, I think everyone's all for it, but when you're adding on top of an already very saturated market, whether it's festivals or promoters or agencies or agents or artists, it's hard to. There's only so many slots at festivals. There's only so many cities to tour in. There's only so many days in the year that you have to kind of consolidate every so often.
You mentioned there like festivals. I suppose let's talk a bit about the growing number of festivals. Starting with you, Ryan. I mean, do you think we've reached peak festival season in the States? Because there's a very interesting article. I can't remember. But it was a very good article. Another really forensic article by an American writer looking at kind of the American side of things. And it was just like it just kind of brought home to me. I mean, I know here in Ireland, in the micro scene, it's a huge number of festivals. You really know you're at peak festival. But from the States' point of view, I mean, some of the billions. You know, some Billions Corporation opening up their database and counting how many festivals.
Yeah.
I think it's an insane amount. From the point of view of Windish, obviously you want to get your acts on these festivals, but does it come a time when you have your Monday morning meetings go, right, this is crazy, this can't go on?
Those conversations are happening now. I mean, what Ali put in her article, we actually have about 200 more festivals in our database. So it's ridiculous. It's also, well, it's ridiculous and it's a new trend for us. It's something we've never dealt with before because they just never existed. We've had festivals, but not like you guys have festivals. So we're kind of dealing with it on the fly now, and we're starting to see the fact that it's not really sustainable. We're seeing festivals pop up and go away from big-time promoters who do some of the biggest festivals in America within 12 months' time. So it's tough. It's gonna bubble. It's a bubble that will pop very soon, for sure.
We're feeling it in Europe too, but I guess festivals have always been a much more like traditional part of our touring circuit and the live music scene. But it's the point that there's that's what Ali was saying in the article, and the journalists too, like, if you start to, in the basic business model of any sales-based business is supply and demand. When you start to supply more than there is demand for, you're doing it wrong. And that's what there is. There's only so many festival tickets. There's only so many people that can buy the tickets for the festivals. So when you have this massive leftover pile of tickets, like, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and also that the landscape for festivals, we were talking about this yesterday, about like Coachella, where people are now only beginning to go to hang out and then watch the headline act.
Yeah.
There's no in between. So what's the point of your band playing at 2 p.m. when there's like 7 people in the tent?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the only point of playing is a fat fee.
Well, no, I mean, it's more to get on the poster, to
Yeah.
get the exposure, because it's a worldwide festival like Coachella, but
Like, you know, like, because more time for it, I put out to the audience, I've got a couple more questions, but I'm interested in kind of like, maybe kind of detailing between the three of you, kind of a hypothetical situation with a band. Like, you see a band in the morning, you really like them, they're like a new band. What would be your approach to that band? I know you're three separate ladies, but you have general ideas about what you do with that band. Be it like we took on Sun, for example, I saw the first gig in Eurosonic. It could be other bands like that. But what is your approach? How do you start kind of like process of developing that band as a live basis?
Which is more interesting. Who wants to start?
I think for most American bands, it's different when I bring a band over from the UK because it's expensive. And, you can't just get a band and tour. But for an American-based band, it's probably the same for a UK-based band. UK is, start developing them out of their hometown right away. Get them on support slots, bigger artists. Try to get them on little festivals. Anything within reach of a certain area, and just branch out from there until something connects on a larger scale. They can afford to drive 2,500 miles across the country. But it's definitely about growing from your little pocket and going from there.
Okay. I like when you did have kind of like a database, let's say, of venues and promoters in like the first tier cities, second tier cities that you know.
There's certain promoters that do a better job of developing acts than others, of course. Yeah.
And it's the same in Europe, that's the same.
Yeah.
You would go to, if you know it's a particular style of band or level of band, you go to a certain promoter, you look at the priority there, instead of going with Live Nation or whoever, the bigger one. So, and it also depends on what the band have in place. Like, do they have a release coming up? Do they, do they have money to do it? Does it make sense for them to go across Europe, or should they just stay in the UK and Ireland? Or, it depends on what's happening PR-wise.
I think it's in the case of this kind of hypothetical band, Jason, at what point do you kind of like start talking to promoters about slots of festivals like Longitude, Latitude, Glastonbury?
I again, everyone's different. I play it very guarded, so I kind of look at, I choose my time and I strike kind of once. I let someone kind of swell in terms of their profile and their interest, and then go, right, I need this slot, you're going to pay this fee, and this is the exclusivity you're going to get. What do you think? So that's how I play it. Whereas some other people from day one will just be like, hit everyone up and be like, you should think about them for your festivals. But I think on the strategy side, I play it in two ways, depending on the artist. So if a band like Temples that I work with, who are a classic band, in my eyes and in their eyes, they should be doing 250 gigs in a year, especially when they're getting in the year of their album release. So I send them everywhere, and that has to be their story because they're a band and that's what they want. But also, in my opinion, bands should be they cut their teeth by touring the crap out of them. Whereas with Song, for instance, in that first year, we did 25 shows between January and September. And we did 1 or 2 shows in each territory where he had popularity. Now, this was because he existed very much online. He had a global presence from day one, which is something I'm a big advocate of. Bands not being local, actually being kind of more global minded. So we had this approach of kind of doing one key booking and then starving that market, to use, that's my favourite bus term at the minute, we're going to starve the market of him, so that when he came back, he hadn't been there for ages, so the interest was high, people wanted to see him, they didn't have an opportunity, so and that's kind of how I book, I think, like 75% of my roster now is by not touring.
But that obviously works well for bands that are really
certain
types, really buzzy bands that there is a groundswell, there's like, building. But then you have the bands that just want to play all the time, just want to get out on the road and they just gig, and then you have the ones that are just really, a lot of Scandinavian bands don't like touring incessantly, they like staying in Scandinavia. So they get better.
Okay, I'm going to turn around to questions to the audience now, just see what we've got there. We'll close with a game of kind of word association. I'm going to say, call one of you out, say a name to you, and you just say to me the first thing that comes to your head. Start with you, Melvin Ben.
Oh my God.
Small with glasses.
Okay. Ryan, Seven West.
Oh, exhausting.
Jason, Grimes.
Babe,
Jason, EDM.
the worst thing ever.
Okay, questions from the audience. You've heard what the agents had to say. They justified their 10%. I think you all turned up late. You missed the support times. So, like, any questions? These Charlie?
What act did you pass on that you now wish you had said yes to?
Oh man, there's so many. I think we were talking about this last night. You know, you could literally. But for me, everybody has different reasons. Like one band for me that is anyway, Ghost. I don't know if you've heard of Ghost. Anyway, that just makes me nearly cry every time. But anyway, and then there's another band. We're still quite small here, but I adore called Hospitality. They're just a really awesome like guitar band. But anyway, yeah, we could have loads of stories.
Churches was mine. Every day.
I passed in 1975. It was super. It was a mistake.
Does there come a time, so like, before we control all these games, does there come a time when you actually can't do anything for a band? Have you ever signed a band and you've just gone, oh my god, no one will take a call?
Yeah.
Like bloggers are laughing about this band. Who's the band?
Well, I'm not saying.
How do you get rid of that band?
How do you what, sorry?
Get rid of that band.
You just have to be honest with them. Yeah, it's the honest. I mean, again, it's the beauty, kind of, in the sense of us not having those contracts with the bands is, in my line, I have a line. It's like it's not you, it's me, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's because it's not really true. It's like, just because I can't get things right for you, doesn't mean someone else will.
And does that happen though?
It's been a really great time.
Does that happen though? If you show someone the door and they go across to someone else and suddenly you know.
Sometimes, yeah, it totally happens, but then also just sometimes it's not going to happen for that band. You've got to be honest with them about it.
Yeah. Audience?
In terms of like what you said about festival peak, what's your future projections and what do you do as a booker? Because there's like so many festivals like opening up each year that I feel like there's going to be like for the public like festival fatigue. How do you think it would affect you, and what do you think? What you're trying to how are you preparing yourselves for like the future?
We're probably not preparing for the future well enough, but I guess we just have to deal with it as and when it arises. But I guess what I guess one thing we try to do is really try to support those festivals that we see existing for a long time, whether they're a brand new festival or a more established festival, like sticking with them, building relationships, loyalty. Another way of doing that is by encouraging bands not to do loads of festivals. So encouraging our bands to actually, do 10 instead of 20. That's the way that we can do that, so that each festival lineup has a much more exclusive lineup and there's not
The same band.
crossover. That's the way that we can help the market. Little things like that, but there's always going to be a festival market.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There'll always be certain festivals, and the festivals that will exist will be the ones that kind of change what they do with what people want. Yeah.
It's interesting that question for you, and the answer is very interesting as well. I mean, like, is there a lack of strategy sometimes about long-term thinking within the industry regarding that kind of thing?
You can only plan really, for the most part, with a new act, 2 years down the line, and see where it goes. It's different when you have heritage acts or something like that. You can plan 5 years. You know what you're going to do if you're Bruce Springsteen for the next 5 years. But for a new act, we don't know where the road is going to take us yet. So there's a 2-year plan, but there's essentially a 5-year plan.
I'd say there's more strategy involved in live music than there ever has been before because of how competitive and saturated to a point the market is. The only way that we can be successful is by strategizing. It's another really gross kind of line that makes it sound like arrogant, but we don't sometimes we're not bookers anymore, we're like strategists, we're part of like building a plot for someone. So I think there's a lot of thought going into it.
Yeah, it's not like you don't just book a show and walk away from it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of thought that goes into why you do certain things and the follow-up from that.
Okay, great.
Do you usually approach bands or do bands approach you? And bands you approach you, what would you like that band to have for you?
I would say 99% of the time we approach the artist or their team, because I think it's more exciting for us. We want to discover something and be like, I want to work with that. That other 1% of the time is discovering something because they've approached you in your inbox. I think we all just want to hear something that we go, holy crap, that's brilliant.
And also if you maybe are sent it from someone who you trust,
Yeah.
so you can send it from a label or from a contact somehow, then you're like, okay, well this person sent it to me, then I'll have this, you know.
I think what we would want to see, that's what I was saying in the speak sessions this morning, normally what I want to see is it being a tip from someone.
Yeah.
But having a bit of having a nice tidy looking Facebook can even help, having nice content out there, having like good press quotes, all those little things is nice to see. But I think the nicest thing to see is someone phoning you and saying, I just found this artist and I think they're great, you should listen to it.
Cool. Next question.
Oh, but in that regard, how close is your relationship with record labels and like music blogs? Because like that, my relationship mostly is tied in to record label and music blogs because of their taste. It kind of like fits into mine.
I think it's also dependent on the agencies, but like definitely really close. Like I know we would work close with particular labels.
Yeah.
I think most people do, yeah.
Bloggers are the new A&R people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Any more questions?
So as bookers, I know that you deal with promoters getting in touch with you and asking to book a band, but how often, what part of your job is actually finding gigs for that band? Is that something you do, or what's the balance then?
It's mostly with like a new act,
Yeah.
trying to find them something in the market, or develop the best situation for them in that spot.
Any more questions? Okay, these people have been talking for 2 hours in speed sessions before this session, so I'm really, really grateful for Eleanor, for Ryan, and for Jason giving you the time and their insights. So please a warm round of applause.